I'm Ryan Cook. I work at Octiv Tinderbox. I've been there for a little over 2 years, probably. I've been doing Ember since being there. This meetup is so Ember side-by-side React. And so in this talk, we're going to take a look into components specifically. And in future talks, we'll look at other things with Ember and React, maybe how routing works, or Ember data against like how React handles models and persisting data and things like that. But this talk will be mainly focused around, hey, I can do this thing in Ember, or I can do this thing in React, and hey, how do I do that in Ember or React? All right. A couple old things before we get started into the actual code. Most of the slides I have here are code-based. So I created 2 little projects, and then I can post this to the meetup link, the presentation, and both project links. So there's 2 projects. The React, I did like a little chat app, and I'll show you that real quick. There's a React chat and an Ember chat, and both, let's just look at the application real quick. It's a simple little application made up of about 5 components. And this one's done in Ember, and this one's done in React. So they both look identical, right? And they don't talk to each other, so if you guys think that they're going to talk to each other, they don't. There's no fun sockety things. So, you know, hello, world, test. And then we allow things like we're going to edit this instance here, this input. So we'll just do 2. And then we can continue adding and things like that. And then it always pushes us to the bottom. And then we can do the same thing on the React side. So hello, world, test, this, that. And then it's always pushing us to the bottom, and we can get in here and edit. Hello world. So this is kind of like the example as we walk through the code, what I'll be referring to the majority of the time. And this can be an interactive thing. I don't mind interruptions. So if you guys want to say, oh, hey, I do it like this, like, great. All right, so a couple other things before we get going. So we have 2 project links. You have seen the projects, and then just a little bit of backstory on it each. So for the Ember project, these are some of the commands that I use just to get this thing going. So I npm install Ember CLI. I created my new Ember app. I added Sass just for some simple styling, and then the below things are just how I generated all of my components, and then how there should be some other things. So how you run, you know, Ember server and get this thing going, and where your app will be located. And then the same thing for our React app. There were a couple different paths I could have chosen with React. So Ember is more of a framework, you know, that is very opinionated, wants things a specific way. React is more of like a library where you can kind of decide how you want to use it. And some people are already like, you know, they have projects out there like with various setups and things like that. And I think they have a new starter kit, which I didn't choose to use in this one. And they also had like a React CLI, which it looked like it was in its infancy. But it would have taken care of some of these npm installs for you. But all of these installations here were including React, Webpack for our server, Babel to just get us so we can use ES6 so we can relate that better with Ember, and a few other things, Sass. So those are the commands I use to get it going, and then I have a little script that I run here for npm start, and that kicks things off, and then we will see our app here on localhost 8080. All right. Hopefully that's not makes it bigger. Huh?
Can you make that big?
I don't know if I can. Hold on, I'm getting really hot.
and I don't get hot, so that must mean I'm nervous.
Sorry, that's what I'm doing. All right. So we are going to look at just kind of how we get like a React app going, right? So in our React app, our chat app, we're going to have an index.html file with a single div that we're going to attach ourselves to. So the way you do that with React is you use React DOM.render, and we're going to pass it what we created. We created this chat container component, and then we'll pass that as the first argument, and the second is who we want to attach ourselves to, which is the app node. So this will inject our chat container inside of that node, and that will be like our root node for our React app. And then on the Ember side of things, so when you're using CLI, you get like an app.js, and what kind of bootstraps this whole thing and gets the whole process going is your Ember application extend, which you can pass like different various things in your environment to. We do have our index.html, and index.html includes like a bunch of different things inside of it. The main thing that we're looking at right here is our content for. Content for is where Ember will start nesting all of our routes and everything like that, where we can then start accessing our first route, and our global route, which is our application, and then our first application template that gets hit always would be our application.handlebars file, and then that's where we will do the similar thing that we did in React, where we have our app node, and then we're using handlebars to display our component, which will be our chat container. So in this, it's still two files, but we have a third JavaScript file that kind of, kicks things off for us. And a lot of these slides that I have too, there's a lot of more links that will explain it further in detail. So when you're actually rendering this component, so this is how our React component will look. So I chose to put all of my components within SRC scripts, and then we'll have chat container.js, and then we're going to use React create class for our component, and all React components have one method that is required, and that is the render. And render will always return your HTML. So your JavaScript and your DOM live in the same file. And just a side note is that a component can only render at the top level one node. So that one node can have as many children as it wants, but you can't have, like our chat room here can't have a sibling of chat room. And then just another thing here, the way you reference class name in React, you call it out like with the class name instead of just class equals, because class is a keyword. So this right here with our render method will output div class chat room, and then just say React chat. We want to do the same thing in Ember. And Ember uses Ember component. So with Ember component, where React had that top level DOM node, where we added chat room in manually down here, like within render, Ember is going to take care of that node for us in our component. So it wants the tag name. Hey, what is that? What is your component? What is your component's tag? And then you can add all your class names to that top level component. And then for every component in Ember, it's going to have a corresponding template file. So you don't have to like re-include that. It's just going to wrap itself around any contents that's inside of that file. So when when we say chat container, we're going to get a div that has a chat room, and then it's going to wrap itself around Ember chat, and it's going to give us the output like this. And Ember will write some fun IDs on there so it can keep track of it. Everybody good with that? What do we got? Variables. This will be a fun one. So variables within our template. React handles variables two ways. One they call state, and another they call props. We'll look at props first. So a property might be something you pass in, right? So I say, this is how we in our initial when we kickstarted everything, we passed our chat container into the app. So we might have a parameter that we pass in just like any other attribute on an HTML node. And we're going to pass in title. And it's going to be a React chat, right? And then we're going to use this as a prop. So when we reference this in React, we're going to say this.props.title. And that's how we can get at that attribute that we passed in. You can set default props. So if you have something that's not always passed in, just default a prop. But then you also have something called state. Now, props should never be modified within the component. This whole data down, actions up, and how that data flows through, that's how props should live. Props should always just flow back through your component. Where state is a variable that you can modify within your React component, and it can actually fire re-renders. And we'll look at how we set state later, but now we're just going to look at how we target state and use state. So you'll see how I'm setting class names here. We're calling a function class names, and then we're just building up a string whether this thing is showing or hiding. This isn't actually in the app. I just wanted to show you something simple about how we can target state. So we're just going to build up our chat room string as a class name, and then this.state, we're defaulting that to false. So this should say hi, so chat room hi as the class name that you add. We'll talk more about state as we go through. But that's one of the key things with React is state versus props, and should you be mutating this thing or letting it flow back through your component. I think I had the output. Oh yeah, so there's the output for that thing. So we'll just get a div, chat room hide, and then it's where we say this.props title as our h1. It's going to be what we passed in up here. So we'll do something similar in Ember. Ember doesn't have the whole concept of state versus props. Ember wants to just always keep your data in sync and modify it. So we'll pass in the same situation. We'll have a chat container. We'll pass in what we'll call a property when we talk about it in Ember. So this property, we're going to default it to default title, but we're overriding it when we pass this thing in as Ember chat. We're using handlebars for our template, so curlies all the time, and then we're going to reference it like we reference all properties, just title or title.name and things like that. And then Ember has this secondary special class binding where, and this is just for fun that I added this, but you can say something like is visible, and then when you do that, then this is a ternary, so if this is true, we're going to say show, otherwise false, or otherwise it's going to be false, and then you say hide. So then it will join these two class name and class name bindings, the results of those together, and then you will get your chat room plus your hide. So it will do that work for you. You guys like that? Yeah. All right. So we're going to get into user events, and then we're going to work on setting state modifying things like that. So here in React, do you guys like that I made the blue ones on the back for React and the red ones? It's not the proper hue, but I tried my best. All right, so we're gonna work on, hey, a user clicked on this thing and now I want to handle it in React. So we're doing something similar where we have our chat container and we're going to set it up with some initial state and it's going to just say link text. And then when we go to render this, we'll say this.state link text. And then that should give us initial text. We have this new piece inside of our render that is on click. So we say on click and then we're going to call a function. And then that function is right up here where we're preventing it from doing anything else like jumping to the top of the page or anything funny. And then right here I'm just constantly, hey, something happened. And then we'll ask basically, hey, link text. What do you have in here right now? If it's initial state or initial text, then we're going to do something. So probably a lot similar to how you handle some click events today. And then here in Ember world, so here in Ember world, we'll do something similar. We'll set up this component to have a default property of link text. So we set it with initial text. And then down here we reference it with handlebars and we say, render us the link text, which is initial text, so that we output something like this where it just says initial text. With Ember, we'll have the same sort of on-click event. The only difference here in Ember is that we are going to use something that they call actions. So this event is going to be handled with an action and that we call update text. And whenever you use action, it's going to send this thing back up to the component on click, and you have to reference that within the actions hash. It's not just like a method that you would call somewhere in the middle here. You have to handle that within Ember's special actions hash. So then we have our update text action here, and then we're just doing the same little consoling business. Something new that you probably know about, but the way you access properties within your component, you have to go through your get. So you say this.get link text. And then that would give you the value. I think you can also say this.link text, but that wouldn't be the preferred way that Ember wants you to do it today, especially when you go to set. And we can talk more about that later when we actually get into setting these properties. So that makes sense how that goes up in Ember. I think a lot of us are more Ember based. So updating these variables. So the same block of code here in React, with the only difference of actually setting. So we're actually, we'll come back to this, but we're going to set this to click text, and then it will update here, and then we actually see that our re-render is going to fire, and then we'll come back and re-render this with our new value of link text. So in React, if you want to access your variables, you go through state. So you say this.state.link text, and that will give you back the value of the thing. But if you want to set, you can't say this.state.link text equals click text, because that's not going to fire anything for re-render. So you're going to want to go through set state. So when you go through set state, it's going to queue this thing up for render, and then it'll apply your changes. It'll apply your changes, and then you will actually see them. So this isn't immediately. It doesn't immediately happen either. It's queued up, and then it'll apply later. In Ember, we do something similar. So the exact same scenario. We say this.set link text, and then our second argument is our value here, and then that does the same thing. So it will queue this thing up for a re-render on your layout, and apply the change. You will want to, this is another, so just like set state, you want to go through set, because if you don't go through set, then Ember doesn't fire like observers that need to change, and it won't re-render your layout. So in React, there's set state, and then in Ember we say set. Rendering a component in a component, so this is done all the time. So our chat container is going to have a message list, so that's that block of like all of our messages. So we're going to have some default state where we have messages, and then down here where you'll see we'll have this nice angle bracket syntax. Hey, message list messages, and you're going to pass it this.state messages, and then that would render. Right now, just an empty div since we don't have any messages. You haven't seen message list, but it just renders a div with just a blank div right now with a class message list. So in Ember, we just set our messages property, and we're just going to make it an empty array. And then we have the curly bracket syntax. We're going to do the same thing. I want a message list. I want to send it down all my messages. So we have the same sort of output where it just gives you the div message list, and then we're going to work on filling this thing up with messages.
Why do you have to do the Ember.js for the array
You don't have to do that. So Ember.a is just a wrapper around like JavaScript's array, so it just gives you more methods to work with. Yep. All right, so now we're going to fill this thing up with messages. And just I'm going to go back real quick. So you'll see that we're passing it. So we're in a chat container here, and we're passing it messages, right? As a attribute param prop. And then we're going to pick that thing up here, right here. So let's look at render real quick. So we're going to render. This is what message list looks like. We're going to have a wrapper. We're going to put a ref on here, which I think this is actually getting deprecated. And then there's a class name. So just 3 divs as a wrapper, and we're calling a function. And then this function is going to return us back an array of nodes based on our messages, right? So this is coming in as a prop that's being passed out. So we're going to access that with props, so props messages, and then we're just going to turn our like array of hashes into an array of nodes, and then send that down through render. And then in Ember, so we have our message list. We're just defaulting the messages to an empty array. And then inside of our handlebars template, we have an each helper. And then a lot like Ruby here, we're going to loop through all of our messages, and then it's going to render out a chat message component, passing the message to each helper. You guys good with that?
So we're talking about the key in React?
Oh, yeah, I did miss that. Yeah, so the majority of the time, React does a good job with identifying your DOM node, and Ember will mark your node. So all that, the ID that we saw earlier a couple slides back, I don't know how far, I don't want to go all the way, but I will. So these like random IDs, Ember tries its best like to keep track, and it makes it obvious. React doesn't make it as obvious, and React has a problem with a root node with all of the same children. So if you have a form element and it's got 16 inputs, type text, value empty, it'll have a hard time figuring out which one is like number 3, right? So React wants you to tie a key to that, and if you don't, it will complain if you don't identify it for it. So,
Just in the console.
huh?
It just complains in the console.
It just complains, and it's an annoying complaint. So we talked about, looping through the Ember side. Getting into life cycles. So every component has a life cycle, and these are the various life cycle events that React supports. So you have something like component low mount, you have did mount, before it receives props, before update, should update. These are different. Will update, did update. These are two that I probably would use more. And then you have a component low mount, so before it destroys itself and then render. So these are all lifecycle events that get hit during the course of the node, the component's life. And then you have the same thing in Ember, and we'll talk about some of the differences, but a lot of these map up exactly to how React is using them. A lot of them are fairly new to Ember as of like Ember 2. But a lot of them are exactly like you have your will render, I did insert it, I finally rendered, before I get attributes, after I update, and then before I destroy myself, I am out of the DOM. So you have all of these hooks that you can tie into, and a lot of the time you're tearing down like jQuery things in these lifecycle. So here is we're going to look at observing changes in a component. So we go to update state. We use our set state, right? And then we do a re-render. Or our props they float back down, right? Causing like something to re-render. The component did update will fire for you. And React is really nice. It gives you like your previous props and your previous state. And then you can compare that against your current props or your current state. So in this scenario, we're just doing something funny like, hey, did my messages change is what we're asking. So this dot props messages length is it greater than what I had previously. So then if that is true, then we're going to do something else. Or like you can say like if props.title equals this or previous props dot title, do something in that case. Ember has that lifecycle hook did update, but did update doesn't give you what its previous value was. So you wouldn't know what messages was beforehand. A lot of, if you're looking for something like that, that's what later in like future talk will look at Ember data, and Ember data will do that for you. But Ember has some other things that you can hook into so you can detect these changes. So they have something, Ember.observer. So you can set up a method that will fire anytime your messages changes. So if something new gets pushed onto the stack or popped from it, then this thing will run. And you're expected to do something here. So inside of here, the only reason I did this is like you can do something at this part, but if you have something that you're waiting for the view to update, then you need to run like use this like Ember run later, which I'm kind of a fanboy of, but I get made fun of it a lot. So this is one way to handle change of messages if you're not using Ember data. And then I just wanted to put in this because I don't talk about it enough in the talk, but this is one thing I really enjoy about Ember is all the things about computeds. So anytime messages is pushed or popped, like anytime it changes, we're just going to do some calculation. This calculation is useless, like we'll never use this. But this is we're going to return back a value, so if it's 2, right, it's going to be 1. And then it's going to store this value in half message count. And then we can use this half message count in our template. And this property will get cached until this changes again. Where in React, if you were wanting to do something like this, you would just have to create a function, and that function is always going to have to evaluate. There's a lot to computed, and I just wanted to highlight the two differences between observer and computed, if you weren't familiar with those two. But observer is more of the, hey, this changed, let's do some stuff. And then the other one is, hey, I want to, this changed, let's reevaluate this property. Yeah. I think that's all of that. I added this slide in here, so because if you're not familiar with React, this would really frustrate you. Because it got me, and I think it burned Dave, but I'm not sure. So this is in our message form. So this is in our, this is in this little blue box down here, like our little form box that we're typing in. And so we're talking about this thing called state, and all we're going to do in this component in our message form is we want to render a form with an input and a button, and we're going to tie our value to this.state input. And then this will be the new piece here that we have an onChange event. So without this onChange event right here, you could sit there and type in that box, and you wouldn't see any values change because state hasn't re-rendered, so this is not going to re-render anything. So you need to tie this onChange event, and then it'll tie up to this function, right? So this function is going to get called, then we're resetting state on event target value, and that will force the re-render in. If you want to type R and Y and A and N, right, like, and it would actually re-render, and you can see what you're typing. And then in Ember, it doesn't really care. You just would have like an input, and then we have our, our general input that we're adding here, and then we're just going to tie input as the value. So then as you type value on your components updated, your end view is updated.
Is there a reason why React does that?
I think that's part of like the beauty behind React, the whole like one-way versus two-way, where Ember is more of a two-way bound, and then in React, once it's more one-way, and you need to like you tell it when.
Okay.
If he wasn't setting the value in that example, like you could type into it normally, and you would just handle it like on the submit. But yeah, when you're controlling the value, like it needs to be controlled through the system.
No, I mean you're great. Say that again?
You can add reference to it, and whenever you want the value that next one is stored, then what you do is you this dot reference, whatever reference name is.
This dot if you had a ref on there, yeah. If you had a ref on there, but you'd still have to have something that's, well, are you saying with this dot state input still tied as value?
No.
You would say.
Yes,
you can do it. Yes, you can do it that way with ref as well. But I heard refs is like, as far as
It's discouraged.
it's becoming discouraged, and it may be deprecated. So I don't know, but yes. We talked about that. Oh, okay. So this is sending an action out of a component. So this is where our form is going. We have an input sitting in our form, right? I typed hello, but now I want to pass that thing out, and we need this to create a new message. So we looked at actions a little bit already, where we have pretty much this thing. So we have state, and then state is getting reset on our update, but I didn't include that since we looked at that last time. And then we have on our form we have onSubmit. So onSubmit would get called. When that form is submitted. And then we're looking at this.state input, so we're going to call that message. And then if the message is empty, we're just going to exit, and we're going to say, you didn't type anything. But this is the new interesting part where, I should have went over this first. Our message form is getting passed a prop that is a function inside of chat container. So this .new message is a function living in chat container. So what we're going to do is we're going to call our prop add message. So this prop add message, we're going to pass it like our message, which is going to get sent out of our component in React, and it's going to call in chat container this .new message with that argument. And then we're going to reset state back to empty after we send it out. And then in Ember doing the exact same thing, we have our funny little action helper here. We're calling submit message. And then remember our actions hash we got to key into, so then we say submit message, and then we're using this .get to get our input. And then we're checking if it's empty. If it is, we're going to return. And then Ember uses send action. So we say this .send action, add message, and then can you see it up there? Message form is getting passed just like how React is doing it. A function being called in chat container, and this would live in the actions hash inside of our chat container component because it's an action that's being passed up. So we're sending an action out called add message, and it's going to receive an action called new message with the argument this .get in. And then we're using this .set to reset our. Does that make sense?
The action name is the parameter, and then whatever uses the argument you pass in.
Yeah, so the action name that we're sending out the action add message, and it will receive in chat container new message.
You have access to the event in chat.
Say that again.
You have access to the event in chat.
Do I have access to the event?
Yes.
You could have access to the event, yes. If we put like E here, yeah. Okay, actions and conditionals. What I was trying to show you here is just how you handle like an if-else condition like in a template. So we're gonna start off, this is our chat message, and what I'm gonna show you is this exactly. So I'm on my chat message, so chat message is this like S hello world piece right here, and then we're gonna hit edit, we're gonna turn this into an input, do a little modification, and then we're gonna hit done. So this is just one component handling, both of those states. So let's just look at render first because that's where it all gets started. So down here in render, I just added a data ID, and then it has a class name, chat message, and then you'll see that I'm calling a function. I want the input text, and then I want to add the button. So the action button is going to be the edit button or the done button, and then the input text is going to just be like the words of the text, or it's going to be like an input box. So if we look at like what the function is doing for input text, you'll see that it's going to look at the props. We're passing in message. We look up here. So you'll see message here being passed in. And then message is an object with ID and text. So then we're going to grab the text. And then we have a state that we haven't talked about, but it's sitting up here. Oh, I added an ellipsis so you can't see it, but there's a default state of is editing false. But if we are editing, then our text is going to become like this input node, and then we're just going to return what text is. And then the same thing with action button. We're either going to return like a button with a click of edit message and edit text, or if we're editing, we're going to return the same anchor with like a click event of update messages and then done. So then let's look at just some of these click events real quick. So edit message, when you click on that, or up here, edit message, and then all we're doing in edit message is we're setting state. we create edit input, which is just going to take our props message text. So we're reassigning that to something in state that we can mutate, and then we're just going to set is editing true. So then now we get the input box and the done button. So then, so with that done button, we get update message. So then when we click update message, we're going to flip the state back to false. Hey, we're done editing this. And then I haven't shown you this thing yet, but I have this thing called message store, update message, and then that will send it up, and then it will flow back down. So there's nothing that you would have to do to update the text. Like this, as a prop, its job is to flow back up, right, and then come back down. Not the prop's job to go back up. The prop's job is to receive the data and flow back through. And then in Ember world, let's see here. So let's look at the handlebars template real quick. Handlebars has like this little if, and we're going to say if we are editing, give us an input with this anchor. And then remember our action, we're going to set up an action that says update message. And if we're not editing, it's just going to be the text. And we have like this option to send them a message to edit message. So when we edit message, the only thing that we're changing here, we're just going to set the is editing state, right? Like the is editing property. And then when we update, we're going to grab the input, we're going to grab the message. We're going to turn editing back off so we just get the text. And then I'm using this thing called message store, which is a service, and then we'll go through some of these. It might be next, I'm not sure. But I'm using an Ember service to handle the state. I would always use like Ember data, but we're going to go over that in another talk, so I just chose the service for this one. So this is just more like this isn't about the component or anything like that, but this is just more like a store object I created. So with this store, let me show you how I use it first, and then we'll come back to the store. So in React, this is our chat container, and then I'm importing this thing called message store. And then so a lifecycle hook, when this component mounts, I'm going to subscribe myself to this store. And this store takes a callback, and then we'll look at that callback more inside of the store. And then when we unmount, we want to unsubscribe from this thing. But just know that when we subscribe, we're giving ourselves access to update messages. Update messages is calling set state, and then this is our data flow back down. So when messages changes, right, then that's going to flow back through and give us all of our new messages in our list. So inside of this, I'm using event emitter. So event emitter is just something that you should receive in newer versions of Node. And this subscribe is just something, I created. This isn't like you could call this Jeff if you wanted to. So this is subscribe, and it takes a callback, and then we're using emitter.onUpdate. So we're calling this update event, and then we're going to fire our callback, which is inside of our chat container component. And the same thing with unsubscribe. When we unsubscribe, we're going to turn that callback off, so no one has to listen out for it. And then we use new message in the other one. So message store would call new message. New message is going to take the message that it's passed, and then we're going to push that onto our message array, and then we're going to emit our update. Our update is this callback that's getting fired inside of our component. So we're calling this subscription right here update messages, and then update messages is going to reset state. So when we get that new messages, we're resetting our messages state, and then it's going to just push it all through. And then the same thing with add message. Oh, that was new messages. And the same thing with update. This little block is just like, it's looking through all your messages, and then it's going to like do an update. And then we're going to emit the same update, and it'll push that all through. if you've never used Ember services, they're great. This Ember service will hold state that you want to use like in multiple components. So you can inject this thing, into various pieces of your app, and it all shares the same state. So that it's an Ember service. So we're going to create a messages array, and then when we used it, we just said like message store dot new message, message store dot update message. But a new message is the same sort of program. New message takes a message, and then we're going to update messages. And Ember just handles it. Once this thing updates, Ember's just going to just update messages because it's the two-way binding, and you don't have to set state or anything like that. And then the same thing with update. We're going to go look up the message, and then we're going to set the text, and then it would just do the update for us on that message. So this is how I use it. So this is how you pull a message store in and use Ember inject service. And then I just created an alias, so it's going to reassign messages just to like a local messages, so I don't have to access it. Like in my template, it's like message store messages and the same messages. And then this is the action hash in chat container that is receiving the new message, and then we're just going to call our message store new message. And then all of our messages would change, or we would receive that new message. All right, guys, I think that's all I've got. So any questions or comments on anything?
Yeah, so if you were doing the push object as well as on the if that was the final JavaScript array, or you could push value change detection getting all set.
No, you totally would.
Okay.
That would still update, yeah. This could have not have been an Ember array. You could have just said push, and it would have. Actually,
But I
don't think it would.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I don't think it would, just because if we created a local variable messages and then you set messages, we would. Yes.
And push object and that find by down there are two additional methods that Ember interface.
Yeah, so this find by, where I was doing that for each and then breaking out early, like Ember gives you these nice little methods that you can find. Let's talk about it more.
A couple big differences I see using it, right, is logic in the template versus in the JavaScript file. And actually React, I guess, does both. Like the template is in the JavaScript file. I enjoy that separation. I guess I enjoy some of the logic in the template, not a lot of logic in the template, but it felt like you were having to create variables. Maybe not temporary variables. Well, yeah, some different variables and reassign them in your JavaScript state. And I think it's a little easier for me, at least, to read it in the template. So I like that else example. That you're just going to pop back and forth between this up down or this down, just based on that is editing state. Yeah, if you're going to find React a little challenging on that. Ember is working towards the angle bracket syntax. So you saw the double curlies a lot around component names, like they are trying to get to the angle bracket syntax that React uses. So that would be nice if you're looking at curly braces around what really is a tag or a component.
Yeah. Yeah, working through this and just seeing them side by side, I was just like, man, I wish they were already in angle brackets. It would just make more sense.
So are Angular files, those all
it compiles it to HTML bars, right? And then to HTML.
So original handlebars, yeah, we just compiled it to HTML strings. Ember has another rendering engine, or not called Glimmer, but it basically processes it and turns it directly into documents. So that's one really nice thing about HTML bar. Well, I guess React's going to do that for you anyway as well. But that Glimmer engine basically compiles a template, so it validates them as well. So you can't have invalid down on any of your templates.
So this isn't specifically about side-by-side use of data. I guess just from like a high level, what would you say the pros and cons are Ember versus React?
Pros and cons.
I feel like the big pros are the things that we didn't even talk about today.
No, no, I want to hear you.
No, you explain it well.
No.
Ember is a framework, so it comes with the router, it comes with the data layer, Ember data, which was mentioned a couple times. It comes with services, initializers. I would even say just all of Ember CLI, so the whole command line interface to generate and work with the project. But React doesn't have it. You have to build those things or pull those things in. You might have to pull in a React router, pull in. You're either doing straight jQuery AJAX calls or some other way of accessing the data store, where it's where data gives you a separate project for extracting a lot of stuff. The other thing I love is the consistency in projects. I don't know if you were watching the file names, but Ember wants things in specific folders with specific file names, because it auto resolves all of those things. So you can override behavior just by a file existing with the right name. So I like some of those folks that there's a whole other part too. Serializers and adapters, whatever backend you're talking to, you can customize how the data is serialized, deserialized, how it's normalized. If you're working with an API you don't have control over, but you want to map it into a nice modern app, like you can demarcate kind of that translation at the adapter or serializer level, and then just treat it like normal model data. I guess that's the other thing, right, is models.
Yeah. Well, you'll get that in React too. But the whole Ember data thing is, like, when we actually, what you saw today, like, you don't see a lot of differences between the two. You say, oh, this React file, the component only has one file, Ember has two, it's using handlebars, and there are a few differences in syntax, but a lot of the concepts are exactly the same. Once we get into things like, when we start talking more about Ember data, I feel like then we'll start seeing more of the differences and where I feel like Ember shines, like, for me.
I don't know much about that. You know more about Redux and Flux, right?
Oh,
Ember data would be Redux and Flux, right?
Yeah.
Like,
It would be similar, but Ember data, or sorry, Flux, and Dave will be able to talk more about this, but Flux is going to look pretty similar to what we have going on in this message store here, and Ember data will give you a lot more than that. But you want to talk more about like how Flux in this, or?
Yeah, I think conceptually React takes a different view on how you deal with data. A lot of times, like, so React is just the templating library, but when you're talking about React, you're usually talking about using Flux or Redux or Mongoose or something like that, where the communities geared themselves towards a very functional style programming. So you change data in a centralized data source. So you would keep all your data in an object like that, and you branch off little trees for everything you need. But data would always flow down, and the re-renders would happen as needed, and you would send actions up, and it would change that data, and it would cause them. So React will calculate the differences between what it expects the DOM to be and what it actually is, only change the differences. So it's pretty fast, but Glimmer is also like very fast too, and that's Ember is very caught up on that, so it's not a huge difference anymore. But I think just the philosophy of we want to change data in one place and we want it to flow down so it's very repeatable. So your render functions should generally be pure functions, as where if you give it the same data in your state props, like you will get the same output. So you could do, like if you were testing a React component, you could say React component, here's some props, I expect the output to equal the string. You can do direct string comparisons. That's really nice. And then you can also like put hooks in the middle, like some middlewares to say log all the changes to my data model. That's really cool unless you do like the time travel thing. Ember is also really great, but in a different way. Like it sets up two-way binding on a lot of things. So when you update state over here, it could update something way over here, which updates a store. So it makes it a little less predictable, which I think the functional people don't like. But it's also a very cool way of doing it, and I recommend you try out both in some fashion at some point. But I think that's really where the differences are, is more on how you treat that data and not like how you do components.
Yeah, that was good. Is Glimmer releasing? Still there?
Glimmer is released, Glimmer's been out since 2013, I think. Yeah, and they're working on Glimmer 2 right
Glimmer
now.
2,
So, yeah, so Glimmer 2 I think is just the beta. Glimmer 2 is being all written in TypeScript as well, and I think the Angular started pushing people towards TypeScript, right? So actually,
All the English things.
all of Angular
Well,
2.
you use JavaScript quantity, that's something.
So yeah, it feels like Angular is choosing TypeScript. I feel like Ember having rewritten Glimmer 2 in TypeScript. You can write Ember applications in TypeScript as well, so I don't see a problem with that up as well.
I see a lot of core libraries being rewritten in something that has some kind of typing system. It's kind of interesting to see, like, people using TypeScript or Elm or AppScript. I think we'll probably see more of that just because library code, you want it to be as bulletproof as possible.